Olafur Ragnar Grimsson, that's the name of the man who might cost us all several billion pounds. He's the president of Iceland, not normally a very controversial job.
So you see, that was Jeremy Paxman on BBC Newsnight, and he says that he says because the president did not sign this bill into legislation, he's the one that has cost Britain the money, not the banking fraudsters.
Yeah, of course. Well, Paxman is an apologist for the bankers in the City of London. He's never going to honestly state the nature of this problem, which is that you've got guys who are now living in London, oligarchs from Iceland, who stole billions from the people, and he's effectively part of the protection racket. Jeremy Paxman's part of the protection racket, protecting the oligarchs and the thieves. He's as guilty and as troubled as all these others. He's part of the racket.
Well, part of his item also talks about the fact that Iceland, before the crash, had banking debts at 10 times GDP. But despite this, remember, in the UK at the time, they were hailing these guys as Viking heroes who had, who had a new form of capitalism. And they were real heroes in the UK. They were the ones that gave them safe haven.
That's right. That's exactly right. 10 times GDP in debts, financed and engineered by the hedge funds and the very lax regulation in London. The source of the problem is London, not Reykjavik.
Exactly. Now, this next clip is from Bloomberg News.
How can you say that Fitch's downgrade of Iceland's government bonds to junk has no significance?
Well, first of all, this rating agency that did that, Fitch, has a lot to answer for because its rating in the last 2 or 3 years has turned out to be completely wrong.
So here you have the Icelandic president pointing out that it is, in fact, the ratings agencies and the Western corporations that colluded to defraud the Icelandic people. Now, this is the final clip I have to show you, and this is from the Newsnight, the BBC Newsnight report. And this is reporter Paul Mason. Listen what he says.
Iceland was the extreme example. Now, many countries in the world, including this one, face a budget deficit problem. And once again, Iceland shows how bad things can get if the people refuse to swallow the medicine of austerity.
There you have it, Max. The Icelandic people refuse to swallow.
Yeah, they refuse to swallow. Yeah, well, thanks, Stacey Herbert, for your political analysis. And this is becoming a political party as the banking and economic fraud turns into revolution around the world. Thanks for being back on the Keiser Report.
Thank you, Max.
When we're back from the break, we go right to Iceland and speak with someone who's part of the revolution there. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the Keiser Report. Let's go to Iceland, where things are heating up, thanks in part to our guest. Brigitte Jansdottir is the leader of the Movement, a group within Icelandic Parliament that is organizing against debt slavery by the United Kingdom and the Netherlands. Welcome to the show, Brigitte. Could you please pronounce your name for me?
Okay, hi, and thanks for having me on the show. It's Brigitte Jansdottir.
Okay, perfect. So tell us about the Movement. What is the Movement?
Well, it was like around the collapse in 2008. A lot of grassroots movements started to pop up everywhere where people wanted to find a sustainable solution in dealing with the crisis because we felt that the members of parliament were not capable and all the different institutes that were supposed to help us avoid this sort of crash.
Okay, now, it's obvious that the bankers in London are trying to put you, and also in the Netherlands, are trying to put your population into debt slavery. A few days ago, you released, quote, a call to the people of the world to support Iceland against the financial blackmail of the British and the Dutch governments and the IMF. Tell us about this particular aspect of your campaign.
Well, I think that this is not only an Icelandic problem, that the bankers are always favored when it comes to government decisions, and we feel that this is a bailout. And like the people in the United States and the people in the UK, they have all had to fork out their tax money for the bankers, for private debt. So I just wanted to find the common ground with the peoples of the world, that it is really time that we stop having our money used to bail out bankers.
Well, as an American, I must say thank you very much for for showing some spine. I only wish my countrymen back in the United States would stage an insurrection against the bankers on Wall Street. I don't know what they're waiting for, but clearly everyone is interested in escaping the tyranny of the fraudsters and the banksters. Should take note of what's going on in Iceland and join the movement, as you call it. Now, the so-called international finance community are calling Iceland, quote, economic pariahs, of course. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think that they should just speak for themselves. And I think we really don't think that it is fair that private debt is pushed on the nation. And also we feel that it is really strange, even though I am aware of the history of the IMF, how they've been used to blackmail nations, that the IMF is used as, a debt collector or a bully to get us to pay debt that we cannot possibly handle.
That's right.
And it's you. And actually, there was an email leaked to WikiLeaks that showed that how this is really operated, and it is basically operated through that the EU member states would block the IMF loan if we would not agree to the ISAFE bailout, and obviously, it was during the time when the British had actually passed a terrorist law or terrorist act on Iceland. And bear in mind, we're 317,000. We don't have a military or army, and we have never had an aggression on another nation. So they just basically used their leverage that they are so huge to treat us like, a colony nation or something like that.
Well, yes, the anti-terror laws that were invoked by Gordon Brown, he did vast reputational damage to Iceland, and therefore Iceland, in my opinion, should be suing Gordon Brown for at least $5 or $6 billion in damages, if not double or triple those damages. I think Iceland could turn this around and actually make money on the mistakes that Gordon Brown clearly made. He jumped too soon with all of his policies demanding repatriation of money. This was clearly going outside of the scope of his purview as prime minister, and he's the crux of this problem, and he should be probably having the British people pay Icelanders at least double or triple the damage. Now let's talk about the population of Iceland itself, paying the debts of a handful of private bankers who were given free rein, and their encouragement by London, encouraged by Brown, encouraged by Darling. Now, I was in London at the time this was all happening, and the Icelandic bankers were hailed as mythical bankers conquering the world. Now, where are some of these bankers now? Aren't they actually hiding in London?
They actually are, and there's actually been, their houses have been splattered with red paint throughout a whole year. Every week or a month, their houses are splattered with paint here in Iceland.
In Reykjavik, that's right. The bankers' houses are splattered with red paint. So, in other words, Brown is very high-minded in his attempt to fight so-called terrorism around the world, but when it comes to fighting financial terrorism in London, he's doing nothing.
Exactly, and these people that, are the owners of the banks, especially the owners of ISAFE, they still, live their luxury lives. And what has puzzled me is that why haven't their assets been frozen yet? I just don't. Nobody here in Iceland understands it. But we are actually offered, the Brits and the Dutch, to do everything we could to help them track down the money that had been stolen by these people and track them down. But they, obviously are not interested because they haven't done anything. They rather just go into the pockets of Icelandic taxpayers and get the money from